You're watching news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Welcome into Heartlander News. My name's Chris Stigall. Be sure to keep up to date with all the latest headlines at heartlandernews.com. Let's get to some good news this week because there was plenty, as a matter of fact. The United States is moving toward troop reductions in Europe. Pete Hegseth scolding NATO allies. I love this. And out of Brussels, from the Washington Post, the Pentagon will conduct a 6-month review of troop levels in Europe as they seek to scale back their military footprint and shift more of the United States' role at NATO to European allies, said Pete Hegseth yesterday. The U.S. plans and questions about them are at the center of talks at NATO headquarters as the Trump administration seeks to curtail the forces and weapons that the United States has dedicated to protecting the continent for decades. Good. Great. Because where the hell have any of these people been during the conflict with Iran? Nowhere to be found. Along with reviewing its troop posture, the U.S. will cut the number of fighter jets, residence drones, and warships that it would activate for Europe in case of war. The U.S. move is set to pull back about a third of fighter jets and some other assets that European nations would struggle to backfill, such as strategic bombers, the diplomat said. NATO officials working out which countries can fill some of the gaps and how fast. European capitals have pledged to take more responsibility at NATO. In Eastern Europe, especially, leaders can still call the Western alliance a crucial bulwark against Russia. Even with the plans for reductions, the U.S. has tens of thousands of troops and nuclear warheads stationed across Europe and remains deeply enmeshed in NATO command and control. Well, maybe, but this is a surefire signal. And by the way, to all of the non-interventionists out there, I hope you're happy, and I hope President Trump gets the credit that he is due for scaling back weapons of war, bringing home our men and women stationed around the world, bringing home our taxpayer-funded assets. If Europe doesn't want to be helpful with our endeavors in the Middle East, specific to Iran, for instance, then let them deal with it themselves. I mean, we've seen what's gone on in London. We've seen what's going on in Western Europe. In my view, they're being conquered by Islamists as we speak, yet they want to continue to sit on their hands and sit on the sidelines while we try to tackle the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they do nothing to lift a finger. They're slowly being conquered in the West. This is not a good time if I'm a European to see the United States peeling back on munitions and personnel. But c'est la vie, Europe. If that's the way you want to play it, fine. I'm all for it myself. President Trump is yanking South Africa's AIDS funding after government failed to protect white farmers. I don't know if you saw this. The Trump administration has noticed the way South Africa has not protected white South Africans, specifically from violence and displacement. This is becoming a real thing. It's probably not something you've heard about, but the racism directed toward white Africans, outright theft of their farmland, has become a huge human rights issue in Africa. And as such, the president and president's cabinet at state told Africa that its government failed to do the following 6 things: provide exemptions or alternatives for U.S. companies on race-based mandates, have senior government officials unequivocally condemn all race-based incitements, prevent the implementation of measures that would allow expropriation with fair compensation, and so on. Anyway, South Africa is a middle-income country and is more than capable of supporting its own health programs, said a State Department spokesperson. Trump holds up a printed article from the American Thinker accusing the South African president of state-sanctioned violence against white farmers in South Africa back in May of 2025. I recall that. This is an important issue. Trump is not backing off of that. So good. Here again, more justice being served on the international stage. Pulling back from an incompetent Europe that doesn't want to be helpful. Pulling back from a racist South Africa being hostile to whites. I love this. This is stuff you're not going to hear. This is not stuff that Harry Enton is going to poll. But the world is sitting up and taking notice. President Trump's not playing. He is serving justice, and he's dispensing it fast. Meanwhile, the education department back here at home, the department said borrowers who are already enrolled in auto repayment don't need to take any further action, but they will automatically see their interest rates lowered by a percentage point beginning July 1. So if you have student loans out there through the Department of Ed, They will reduce the student loan interest rates by 1% starting July 1 for borrowers who are enrolled in automatic repayments. So a little relief there for those of you who hold some student loan debt. Speaking of colleges, here's more wins this week. Some colleges are pulling back from Pride Month amid pressure from the Trump administration. What does this mean exactly? Well, dozens of colleges, and this is not the Bette, we started the week with Bette Midler singing. That's not what this is, just to be clear. Dozens of colleges have quietly pulled back from Pride Month this year under pressure from the Trump administration to enforce institutional neutrality policies. The trade publication Insider Higher Ed reported that the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, UNC Greensboro, Lamar University in Texas recently deleted their LGBTQ social media posts. Other top schools pulled down pride flags from public spaces, including the University of Chicago and Boston University. Do you see the power of the taxpayer funding that goes flowing into these places, and when it's threatened, what they're willing to do and not do? Are you following this? Because that's what it is. The University of North Texas dropped its sponsorship of the Denton Pride Festival. And the story goes on to say the shift is having clear ramifications across the country where we're seeing rainbow crosswalks painted over and pride-themed displays erased. The Education Department redesignated June as Title IX month for the second year in a row, pushing colleges to publicly repudiate the Biden administration's support for male-born transgender athletes competing in women's sports. The month honors a 1972 federal law requiring equal opportunities for male and female athletes. I think this is brilliant. The Trump administration using the Education Department to force a celebration of Title IX, fair treatment of women in competitive sports, instead of using it as a month to promote men pretending to be women and unfairly competing against women. The Education Department has investigated dozens of school districts and colleges that reinterpreted the Title IX law to protect self-identified gender identity rather than biological sex. I love this. And furthermore, they know that if they get out over their skis at these universities promoting this dreck, they could lose federal funding. And that terrifies them more than anything, because guess what? People are not going to college at the rate they used to. Colleges are dropping in attendance. Their money is drying up. They can ill afford the federal government, your tax dollars, taking away more because they get crossways on this Title IX stuff or they start playing politics. So it's remarkable. And President Trump here again, he has the leverage. He understands these colleges, they can't play. They can't afford to play. I mean, unless you are one of these very, very, very well funded, these massive endowment schools, these Ivy League schools that have gazillions of constant free flow of endowment dollars. These public institutions, they can't stand, frankly. They've raised their tuitions to a place that's already unaffordable for most Americans. People are really beginning to realize taking on copious amounts of student debt does not pay. So the Ed Department, a 1-2 punch here, lowering the interest rate for those who have student loans and they're on a repayment program, and at the same time telling colleges, you keep pushing this stuff, we're going to pull their taxpayer funding. I love it. Great stuff from the Ed Department. On a related note, just a cultural note while we're at it, there's a minor league baseball team in Pennsylvania who has canceled their Pride Night game. And why? And by the way, I just want to be clear. This is not about me telling you, I don't think you should be allowed to have your Pride celebration or whatever if you want. That's fine. Go for it. But just understand, not everybody supports it, and you're going to get pushback. And the great pushback is underway, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I think I told you on this show that Catherine Hanaway, the Attorney General of Missouri, has already warned Major League Baseball that if there's any kind of retribution or punishment of Major League Baseball players who are playing in Missouri for refusing to wear the Pride Night garb or inscripting, biblical scripture on their hats or uniforms or whatever, if there's any kind of retribution from Major League Baseball to players for that while playing in Missouri, Catherine Hanaway said to Major League Baseball, we'll see you in court. That's my AG. I love that. The push is on. A lot of players are saying, we're not comfortable with this. Yeah, athletes are by and large, and this is something a lot of people don't know or talk about much, but most athletes, particularly baseball players, they're conservatives. They're often Christian conservatives, and it's never really much been discussed. but it's true. And now the York Revolution, if you don't know them, again, a minor league baseball team in Pennsylvania, stated that after Thursday's game, several players refused to wear special rainbow-themed uniforms. York Revolution said that tickets to the game may be exchanged for any remaining 2026 season games, so they canceled the game altogether. York Revolution announced the forfeiture in a statement saying this decision was not reached lightly. Unfortunately, several of our players have refused to wear the scheduled Pride Night jersey, and the club decided that hosting the event is more important than forcing players to wear jerseys that they are not comfortable with and playing the game. As a result, and out of respect for the Pride community and the York community as a whole, the York Revolution has decided to cancel the game. Yes, out of respect for Pride, we've decided to cancel the game. No, it turns out you can't play a game without players, and the players don't want to wear the stupid uniforms. But isn't it amazing? The front office, these guys that don't, they make all their money. The show is on the field. The show is the players. The only thing that matters is the players. If you don't have players, you don't have a game, you don't have an event. So they had to cancel the event. But yet they still pretended in the front office of the York Revolution that this was about Pride. We canceled it to celebrate Pride. I mean, that's quite a framing. Way to spin it. You canceled the event to celebrate Pride, to celebrate Pride. You follow? It's such a joke. It's such a joke. And I'm glad to see this. This is a long time coming. Again, it has nothing to do with being anti-gay or hostile to people who are gay or whatever. Have your parade, have your party. But you cannot force people who have objection to this sort of thing, particularly people who object to it publicly, this idea of pride and being forced to wear rainbow stuff. You know, imagine going to your office and your boss greets you at the door and said, here's your obligatory Pride Month rainbow pin or sticker or jersey or whatever. I need you to wear this around the office this month. I think a lot of us who are believers would have a decision to make about whether we could continue to work there or not, or refuse to show up. And I think we'd have, by the way, I think we'd have a case in court if any of our bosses came along and said, hey, put this jersey on to celebrate LGBTQ plus politics this month. I think you could get yourself an attorney and find yourself in a court of law successful if your employer forced you to do that. And yet that's exactly what Major League Baseball's been trying to do to their players and also some minor league teams. And now the players are pushing back and saying, no, go ahead and try to have a game without us playing. The York Revolution just effed around and found out. This is what has to happen. This is what everybody of conscience, this is what everybody who is a conservative, particularly on cultural issues, this is what we must do. Band together, because there are more of us than there are of them, and say, no, it's not about being anti-you, but it is about being pro-us. It is about being pro-Christian. It is about being pro-biblical principles. And we're not backing away from them to be polite. We're going to stand firm on them. So you're going to, if we must be forced to tolerate and live with the LGBTQ community, then they must also be forced to tolerate and live with us. And so at a minimum, at a bare minimum, culturally, in public places, it's a draw. We're not going to be waving. Okay, you say, no scripture? Okay, not great about it. That's an individual's decision, whether they're comfortable with being told no scripture. But there damn well better be no pride flags then. That's the trade-off. Then it's going to be even Steven. It's not going to be pride stuff shoved down our throats and no scripture, no God, no Christianity. That doesn't wash. And in a culture that is starting to pick up steam for believers, very, very good news. I'm elated by it. It put me in a great frame of mind when I read that story this morning. Also a federal appeals court ruled yesterday that the Department of the Interior can, in fact, remove and replace a slavery exhibit at the site of the United States' first executive residence in Philadelphia. I know a little something about this, having lived in Philadelphia for a time. The President's House is what it's called. It's on Independence Mall. It is just across the street from the Independence Visitors Center. It is the first residence that George Washington, as the chief executive, stayed in, just not even a football field, I don't think, away from Independence Hall. Literally, he would walk out the door of Independence Hall and walk down to this small house that was very close by. They the city of Philadelphia and the Parks Service reconstructed sort of a framework of the president's house there on Independence Mall. If you haven't been, it's worth going. But when they opened this big display, I think it was around 2010, 2009, 2010. Surprise, surprise. They had dug up. It's an interesting thing because they dug up sort of the underground of it too, where, you know, the slave quarters and the kitchen and the whole thing, sort of the basement, and you can see it, what they've exhumed through sort of a glass floor, a plexiglass floor. So it's interesting. It's cool. It's where George Washington stayed and all that. But what Obama's Interior Department did when they opened it was make it a tribute to slavery. Like, it's if you go and you saw it before what Trump did here, you would think that it was just an homage to slaves. You barely even really understood that it was George Washington's first residence as president of the United States. And that was Trump's objection to it. And so he sent the Interior Department to Independence Mall to take down this stuff and replace it with more historically accurate, and, by the way, text that was favorable to George Washington and the work that was done on Independence Mall, which is not a bad thing. And can you do both? Again, this is just like the pride thing. You don't have to hate people who are gay. You don't have to say you're not allowed to recognize that you're gay or have your pride celebrations or whatever, but you don't get to erase Christianity. You don't get to silence people of faith. Similarly, is slavery something important that we acknowledge in the country? Of course it is. Is it a blot on the American story? Of course it is. Was it erased from the president's house exhibit? No, not at all. And this 3-judge panel said as much. A 3-person panel ruled that a lower court didn't have the authority to block the president's order because Philadelphia, the city, does not own the president's house or the Independence Historical Park. And one judge particularly went on to say the new signs and displays that have been mounted on this by the Trump administration give full historical context. Now, I have not been back to see this display since the Trump administration and the Interior Department replaced these things, but the judge said it this way: the new display highlights the momentous events that took place in the president's house and the other sites at Independence National Historical Park. They acknowledge the evil of slavery, including its injustices and hypocrisies, and by telling the story of 9 slaves that Washington kept in the president's house, remind us of their essential humanity. So it did not, in fact, erase the premise that George Washington held slaves there. It did not erase the negative storyline that slavery was an ugly stain on American history, and it's something that they acknowledge, they still acknowledge. They just reframed it so as to not make it the only focus. It was not simply a monument to slavery. You have to tell the whole story. That's all. It's not about excluding a part of the story. It's about not excluding the George Washington part of the story and the founding of the country and the significance of his role there. And there was no evidence. If you'd been to see that previous to the Trump administration, you'd be forgiven if you thought it was just a slavery tribute and nothing more.